Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something that's always on everyone's mind, sustainable growth.
Absolutely.
We found this great article called Beyond Sales and Costs, How Smart Profit Management Fuels Sustainable Business Growth.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think this one is going to challenge a lot of those, basic business sayings that we've...
like those mantras we always hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So like one of the things that I thought was really interesting is like, you know how we always hear
Yeah.
boost sales or, cut costs. It's kind of like the go-tos, right?
Yeah.
But what if we actually looked at some of the assumptions that underlie that?
Yeah. And I think we can get kind of stuck in a rut with that.
Yeah.
Just always thinking about those same two
Yeah.
things over and over again.
Yeah, it's like business 101, right?
Right.
Sales minus cost equals profit.
Right.
But this article kind of throws a curveball.
Yeah.
And it says, what if we flip that equation on its head?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a good shift in perspective. I mean,
Yeah.
instead of looking at costs as like a given
Yeah.
and then trying to maximize the sales,
Right.
what if we prioritize profit first?
Yeah.
So they introduced this alternative equation, sales minus profit equals cost.
So wait a minute. So you're saying like we actually figure out like what our profit margin
Yeah,
that we want is first,
exactly.
and then we kind of work backward
Uh-huh.
to figure out costs.
That's right. So you're kind of proactively
Yeah.
shaping your financial outcomes instead of
Yeah.
reacting to them.
That's really cool.
Yeah, the author actually had a personal story
Oh, wow.
about how using this profit first system completely transformed their business.
Interesting.
They were able to avoid overspending
Yeah.
and build a really sustainable model by setting that profit target first.
I love that. It's like instead of, getting stuck in that cycle of like, okay, I need to make more revenue
Yeah.
to cover my expenses.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, okay, this is how much profit I want.
Mm-hmm.
And now let me figure out like how to make my spending
Right.
fit into that.
That's right. It takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
And it avoids a really common trap that I think a lot of businesses, especially like startups, fall into, which is that illusion of success
Right.
versus actual profitability.
Okay.
So we see this a lot with companies that are really focused on rapid growth
Yeah.
and chasing these really big valuations,
Uh-huh.
but their burn rate is through the roof.
Yeah. It's like look rich, but be broke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the article also brought up an interesting point about venture capital.
Uh-huh.
So, you know how those VC funding models often emphasize
Yeah.
rapid growth and scaling,
Right.
but at what cost?
Yeah.
So it kind of challenges us to ask, how much is enough?
Right.
Like, are we scaling because it's actually profitable?
Yeah.
Or are we just chasing a higher evaluation?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with that.
Yeah, I think so.
It's easy to get caught up in that growth at all costs
Yeah.
kind of mentality.
Right.
But this article really forces us to step back and,
Yeah.
and consider the long term.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it is just changing our mindset.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest mindset shifts that this article encourages
Okay.
is to move away from just focusing on increasing sales or cutting costs,
Right.
and instead embracing profitability as the driving force behind all your decisions.
So it's not about being the biggest.
Yeah.
It's not about being the fastest growing.
Right.
It's about being really strategic
Yeah,
and making sure that everything is contributing to that profitability.
exactly. The article dives into this idea of finding a sustainable balance.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like in practice? How do we achieve that?
Well, so one of the key concepts they highlighted was this idea of synergy
Okay.
between sales, costs, and profits. And it's not just about optimizing each of those in isolation.
Right.
It's about making them work together.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually create that synergy?
Well, imagine a business that has a really clear understanding of
Okay.
what their desired profit margins are.
Okay.
So every decision they make,
Yeah.
whether it's like developing a new product
Yeah.
or, running a marketing campaign,
Yeah.
they're evaluating it through the lens of,
Okay.
will this contribute to our profitability?
So they're not just chasing the next sale. They're
Exactly.
thinking about the long-term impact on their bottom line.
Exactly. And it goes beyond individual decisions, too.
Okay.
It's about building a culture of profitability.
Hmm.
So everyone in the organization, from
Yeah.
the sales team to the engineers,
Yeah.
are thinking about profit.
Wow. So not just revenue or expenses, profit is like
Profit is the focus.
the focus.
Yep.
That's a big shift.
It is a big shift, but the article argues that it's essential
Yeah.
for long-term sustainability.
Okay, I can see why that would be.
I mean, think about it. A business that is laser focused on profitability
Yeah.
is going to be much more resilient
Uh-huh.
when challenges come up.
Because they're not overextended.
Right.
They're not, going after everything that
Yeah.
looks shiny.
They're making calculated decisions
Right.
based on a solid understanding of their financials.
This is all starting to really click for me.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. And this all ties back to that idea of scaling smartly.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that phrase a lot,
Yeah.
but I've never really thought about what it actually means.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So it's about growing your business
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't compromise your profitability.
Okay.
So sometimes that might mean saying no
Okay.
to opportunities
Yeah.
that look really tempting on
Yeah.
the surface.
Yeah.
But they could actually strain your resources.
Okay.
Or, dilute your profit margins.
So it's about being really strategic and disciplined.
Exactly. It's not about growth for growth's sake.
Yeah.
It's about being really intentional
Right.
about how you grow.
It's almost like the tortoise and the hare.
Right.
Slow and steady wins the race.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the article emphasized that sometimes the smartest move
Right.
is not to expand too rapidly,
Right.
but to consolidate,
Great.
fine-tune your operations,
Yeah.
and just make sure you have a really solid foundation.
It's like building a house.
Yeah.
You don't want to just keep adding floors
Right.
if the foundation can't support it.
Exactly.
Right.
And that foundation is built on profitability.
Mhm.
It's understanding that sustainable growth is not a sprint.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah.
a marathon.
And speaking of that,
Yeah.
that reminds me of a quote from the article. Success is not about scaling rapidly, but about scaling smartly, where profitability and sustainability lead the way.
That's a good one.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you're growing, but you're also healthy and sustainable.
Exactly.
Well-
Long term. And the article goes on to argue that this approach is not just about maximizing profits.
Mhm.
It's about building a business that can actually stand the test of time.
It's about resilience,
Exactly.
being able to adapt
Yeah.
to whatever the market throws at you.
That's right.
Right.
And that's where this whole idea of
Yeah.
shifting our mindset comes full circle.
Yeah.
It's not just about changing the formula.
Yeah.
It's about embracing a whole new way
Right.
of thinking about your business.
So how can people listening actually start to make this shift?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
What can they do?
Yeah.
So the article offers some really practical advice.
Okay, awesome. Let's hear it.
So one of the most powerful things
Yeah.
they suggest is to literally flip that profit equation in your mind.
Okay.
So instead of sales cost profit,
Right.
start thinking in terms of sales profit costs.
So instead of thinking about it as like
Yeah.
profit is the leftover,
Right.
you're making it like a non-negotiable
Exactly.
upfront.
It's a fundamental shift
Yeah.
in how you think about it.
Yeah.
And they even suggest literally setting aside your desired profit first,
Mhm.
almost as if it were an expense itself, and then managing the remaining budget for your costs.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's almost like paying yourself first,
Uh-huh.
but instead of paying your personal account, you're paying your profit account.
I love that.
Right, yeah.
You're prioritizing that.
Yeah, it's about recognizing
Yeah.
that profit is not just like
Right.
a nice to have.
Yeah.
It's the lifeblood of the
Yeah.
business.
It's what lets you reinvest and grow. Exactly.
Right.
That's how you create long-term value.
It's all making so much sense now. Like this one little shift
Yeah.
has so many ripple effects.
It can change your whole business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the article really encourages people
Right.
to just experiment with this approach. See how it changes your decision-making
Yeah.
and ultimately how it changes your results.
I love that. So for our listeners who are like, okay, I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah.
Where do I start?
Yeah.
Where would you point them?
Well, I think the first step is awareness.
Okay.
Just start paying attention to your profit margins.
Uh-huh.
Are they where you want them to be?
Okay.
If not, why not?
So get a really clear picture
Yeah.
of where you are.
Of your current financials.
Yeah.
And then you can start exploring this idea of
Yeah.
the profit first system. There's
True.
tons of resources out there, books, articles,
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
Awesome. This has been so eye-opening for me.
Good.
I feel like it's challenged my assumptions about business growth.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in
Yeah.
chasing the wrong things.
Totally. I'm definitely going to be looking into this more.
Right.
So for all you deep divers out there,
Yeah.
take this info, apply it to your businesses,
Uh-huh.
experiment with prioritizing profit,
Yeah.
and let us know what you discover.
I think you'll be surprised.
Definitely. And as always, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious and stay profitable.
See you later. It's this idea of synergy between sales, costs, and profits.
Yeah.
It's not just about optimizing each of those, like, in isolation,
Right.
but it's about making them work together.
Yeah, that makes sense. But how do you actually create that synergy?
So you can imagine a business that has a really clear understanding of its profit margins.
Okay.
So every decision that they make,
Yeah.
whether it's, like developing a new product or running a marketing campaign,
Yeah.
they evaluate it based on, will this contribute to our profitability?
So it's like, instead of just always chasing the next sale,
Right.
it's being really mindful
Yeah.
of the long-term impact.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just those like individual decisions.
Okay.
It's about building a whole culture of profitability.
So you're saying like everybody from the sales team to the engineers,
Yeah. Everybody in the organization.
they're all thinking about profit.
Yeah. Profit is the main focus.
Not just revenue or expenses. Profit is like
It's the North Star.
yeah, that's a big shift.
It is a big shift, but the article argues that it's really essential for
Yeah.
long-term sustainability.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it,
Yeah.
a business that's really laser focused on profitability is going to be way more resilient
Yeah.
when those challenges come up.
Right. Because they're not overextended.
All right.
They're not chasing, every shiny object.
Exactly. They're making calculated decisions
Yeah.
based on a solid understanding of their financials.
This is making a lot of sense to me.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I'm starting to see how all this ties together.
Yeah, and this all ties back to that idea of scaling smartly.
I've heard that phrase before, but I've never really stopped to think about like what it actually means.
Yeah.
What does scaling smartly actually look like?
So it's about growing your business in a way that doesn't compromise your profitability.
Okay.
So sometimes that means that you have to say no
Right.
to opportunities that might look really tempting at first.
Yeah, they might look really good on the surface.
Or right, but they could strain your resources
Okay.
or dilute those profit margins.
So it's about being really strategic and disciplined.
Yeah, it's not about just growth for the sake of growth.
Right,
It's
yeah.
about being intentional.
Yeah. It's like the tortoise and the hare, right?
Yeah.
Slow and steady wins the race.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. And the article even says that sometimes
Yeah.
the smartest move is not to expand really rapidly, but to really consolidate.
Right, to kind of fine-tune those operations
That's
and make
insane.
sure you have a really solid foundation.
You're like building a house,
Exactly.
You don't just keep adding floors,
Right, you got to make sure that foundation is strong.
right? If the foundation can't support it, you're in trouble.
Exactly. And that foundation is built on profitability.
Mm.
It's about understanding that sustainable growth is not a sprint.
Yeah.
It's a marathon.
Oh, that reminds me.
Yeah.
There's this great quote from the article. It
What's
says,
that?
success is not about scaling rapidly, but about scaling smartly, where profitability and sustainability lead the way.
I loved that one.
It's like, you got to find that sweet spot
Yeah.
where you're growing, but you're also healthy.
Yeah.
You're sustainable for the long haul.
Exactly.
Right.
And it goes on to say that this approach,
Okay.
it's not just about maximizing those profits.
Okay.
It's about building a business that can really withstand the test of time.
It's about creating something that's resilient
Exactly.
and adaptable.
Yeah.
Right? Like whatever the market throws at you,
Yeah, you're ready for it.
you can handle it.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like this whole idea of like shifting our mindset
Yeah.
comes full circle.
It all connects.
It's not just about changing a formula.
Mm-hmm.
It's about embracing a whole new way of
Mhm.
thinking about your business.
Yeah.
So for people listening
Yeah.
who are like, okay, how do I actually make this shift happen?
That's a great question.
Yeah, what are some concrete steps they can take?
Yeah. So the article offered some really practical advice.
Okay, awesome. Let's hear it.
So one of the most powerful things they suggest is to literally like flip that profit equation in your mind.
Okay.
So instead of sales cost, profit,
Right.
start thinking sales profit cost.
Mm.
Yeah. So instead of thinking about it as like profit is what's left over,
Right.
you're making it like a non-negotiable
Right. You're putting it up front.
up front. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a fundamental shift in
Yeah.
how you view it. Yeah. Yeah.
And they suggest like actually setting aside your desired profit first, almost like it's an expense,
yeah.
and then managing the remaining budget for your costs.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's almost like paying yourself first,
Yeah.
but instead of paying like, your personal account,
Right.
you're paying your profit account.
Yeah. You're prioritizing profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that profit is not just a nice to have.
Right.
It's essential.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the lifeblood of your business.
Yeah, it's what allows you to reinvest and grow.
Exactly.
Right.
It's how you create long-term value.
This is all making so much sense now.
Good.
It's really interesting to see how, like, one little shift
Yeah.
can have all these ripple effects.
Yeah, it can really transform your whole business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the article really encourages people to just experiment with this approach. See how it changes your decision-making
Right.
and ultimately see how it changes your results.
Okay, I love that. So for our listeners who are like, I'm ready to do this, where do I even begin?
Yeah.
Where would you point them?
So I think the first step is just awareness.
Okay.
Just start paying attention to your profit margins. Are they where you want them to be?
Yeah.
If not, why not?
Get a clear picture of your current financials.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then you can start exploring this idea of the profit first system.
Okay.
There are so many resources available out there.
Yeah.
Books, articles, all sorts of things.
Awesome. This has been so eye-opening for me.
Good. I'm glad.
It's really challenged some of those assumptions I had about business growth.
Yeah.
I think it's so easy to get caught up
Yeah.
in chasing the wrong things.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to take a step back
Yeah,
and reassess.
totally.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be looking into this more.
Awesome. I encourage you to.
So for all our deep divers out there,
Yeah.
take this information, apply it.
Experiment with prioritizing profit.
Yeah.
And let us know what happens.
Let us know what you learn.
Yeah, what you discover.
Yeah.
And as always, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious and stay profitable.